This happened fast. No excuse absentee voting now underway in the big Frank White recall election. This week we're taking the recall debate on the road. Tonight we're bringing our cameras along with hundreds of your friends and neighbors to the Kansas City Plaza Library for an hour-long special edition of the program, A Frank Decision, Jackson County's historic recall vote.
It's a power grab to get me out of office so that I believe that the stadium vote plays a big part here.
It is about our property taxes. It isn't about the stadium. You're misreading us as taxpayers. Thank you so much.
Let me just make it real clear. This recall has nothing to do with the color of his skin. It has everything to do with his poor leadership in the country.
Well, I know I get 2 minutes. 9 people on that.
Okay.
I know.
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize, and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees. The Francis Family Foundation through the discretionary fund of David and Janice Francis. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
To recall or not to recall, that is the question. Over the years, by the way, as long as I've been doing this job, we hear about recall elections all the time. Mark Funkhauser, when he was mayor, they wanted to recall him. Quinton Lucas, mayor of Kansas City, not once but twice. And the poor mayor over in Prairie Village, there have been 9 actually, recall efforts against him over the last few years. None of them, though, have gone absolutely anywhere, which makes what we're going to have as this vote right in front of us so rare and historic. And over this next hour together, we're going to look at the pros and cons, the impact, implications, and ripple effects of this big vote with Jackson County Executive Frank White. Thank you for being with us. First of all, can I count you as part of the no side in this? Okay. Also with us is Sean Smith, who has been one of the most outspoken supporters of the recall effort on the Jackson County legislature, though he's one of the only people who couldn't be appointed to this position if this recall is successful because he's a Republican. We'll have more on that in just a moment. Megan Smith, right over here, was the only member of the Jackson County legislature who didn't vote to authorize this recall election. That doesn't mean she's a full-throated defender of the Jackson County executive, but she has a lot of questions about if this is the right move. We'll get to them during this program. And some political scientists have called recall elections the, quote, nuclear bomb of politics. Is it good for democracy for somebody to just collect a bunch of signatures to oust somebody from office? With us to get the impact and repercussions of this vote from the Political Science Department at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, is Greg Vonamy. Thank you so much for being with us. And I've certainly been reading a lot of interesting articles of late from around the country about concerns that it's elected leaders of colour who might be more likely to be recalled. By the way, Gwen Grant, the CEO of the Urban League, joins us to weigh in with her perspective. But thank you. There's also a sixth panelist, and it's you. We'll be hearing your questions. 20 seconds or less, everyone. There's a lot of us. No big statements or essays or diatribes. 20 seconds or less, ask a question of the panelists. But let me start. Frank White, if I ran into you at the local grocery store and I said, oh, you are the county executive. I heard there's this recall election against you. I'm picking up my cornflakes from the cereal aisle. Why should I vote no on this?
I think you should vote no on the recall because the recall itself is really it's a power grab. It's a power grab to get me out of office so that I believe that the stadium vote plays a big part here. Prior to the stadium vote, the recall was going nowhere. After the stadium vote, $400,000 went into the recall election. So I really feel like it's a power grab for politicians and for backroom deals for the stadiums.
Sean Smith, what has the Jackson County executive done so terribly wrong that he should be ousted from office by voters?
Yeah, so I'd say that's a question for the voters. I think the most frequent reason that I hear is because we've had such a struggle to get our assessments right, not just in 2023, but even before that. and lately in 2025 with respect to commercial assessments. And I think that public a lot has a perception that Frank isn't working for them by not showing up for legislative meetings while we're in the middle of a budget stalemate, by locking the legislatures out of his offices and the executive offices, and that includes keeping us from our own county council. It's just apparent from the inside and from the outside that the desire to collaborate and fix things isn't there.
How do you respond to that, Mr. White?
I think those are all false statements. I've been in office for 10 years, and my door has always been open to anyone who wanted to come and visit and talk. As far as locking folks out, and I have no clue. As far as the meetings go, Nick, I don't have to attend their meetings. These are their meetings. I'll send my people to their meetings as a courtesy, but I don't have to attend their meetings because our setup is different than the city's setup, where the mayor is part of the legislature. He runs the city council. He runs the council. He gets a vote. I don't even have a vote. So I go because I'm interested in things, but I'm not mandated to be at every meeting.
Megan Smith, what problem does this solve?
A recall in any fashion can cause a great deal of collateral damage, regardless of what the reason is, because at the end of the day, the ones who end up paying the largest costs are our taxpayers and our communities. And I personally don't think, from my own experience, that removing one person from office for whatever your reason may be, and I'm not saying that your reasons are not justified, won't push the ball forward as far as governing is concerned. I mean, you've seen, the biggest claim that Frank doesn't show up to our meetings. I honestly don't think that Frank showing up to our meetings will help the legislature function any more cohesively than what it is right now. So the legislature has to take a great deal of blame as well as part of this whole process, because we're here to work together.
We hear a lot about property assessments as being one of the main causes of concern of voters. If Frank White is recalled on September 30th, do we fix the property appraisal mess? Do property taxes go down?
Short answer, no. And I'll say the reason why is because the assessments are only a piece of your property tax bill. And in fact, right now in the month of September, your taxing jurisdictions, which are those multiple entities that we pay our taxing dollars to. So if you look at your bill, you see your school district, you see your fire district, your city if you're not in an unincorporated area. Those assessments and those levies that are being set right now those meetings are being held in the month of September. Those are public meetings. They invite public comment. And so when you get your bill that is going to be due December 31st, what's happening right now in the month of September in your various jurisdictions weighs a lot on what that amount will be.
Gwen Grant, if you're unhappy with Frank White, why not just vote him out at the next election?
Well, see, the importance of understanding why a recall is to know that the recall measure is an opportunity to get for the voters, for the public, to have redress when the elected official fails the people. And in this case, this is not about a power grab, as the county executive is claiming. This is about poor, failed leadership. So it is important to say I don't have to go to the meetings is really disrespectful of the legislative process. Every county executive before Frank White attended meetings and worked collaboratively with the legislature.
Does it matter to you that the county executive has said he will not seek re-election? So
no,
it's going to be in about a year. He'll be out of office anyway. Why not just wait till...
Why, we don't need to leave another year. There's too much costs to have Frank White in another year. I can give you 70.2 reasons. One being that we are still sitting on $70.2 million in ARPA funds that he has stonewalled, as opposed to getting those dollars on the street into social service organizations. He can't even answer the question when on one of the news stations, how many meetings have you attended? I can't answer that. Well, I would think the county exec should be able to say, I've only attended, 10 out of 80, whatever that number is. Just say that.
Well, answer this question, Mr. White. Are you still intent on leaving office and not running for re-election if you are successful?
Yes. But in response, they're hung up on these meetings. These meetings that are not my meetings. They're meetings where I have my chief of staff, my chief operating officer. They're all at these meetings as a courtesy to these meetings. So this recall election is costing us $1.8 million. Money that I think can be saved. I don't think that it's responsible governing to have to go through a $1.8 million election.
I want to bring in Greg Vonamy, our middle, not putting his finger on the scale person from UMKC. But as Americans get so frustrated with their political system, are we having more of these recall elections? Are they more frequent now?
Short answer is no. So if you look over the last 10 years, recall elections follow a little bit of a sawtooth pattern. So some years they're a little higher, some years they're a little lower. But is there any great trend towards a significant increase or decrease in recall elections? No.
By the way, I did look up, actually, last year, there were 108 recalls across the country. 77 of those leaders were removed from office. 31 survived.
33.
But just as interestingly, 16 officials resigned before the election, and one leader in Flint, Michigan, died before the recall vote was held. So just because a recall election is added to the ballot, many voters are willing to give elected leaders the benefit of the doubt, Greg.
Yes, yes, no. So that's a great academic answer.
That is our major line for our tease of this program. Yes, yes, no.
So do they give them the benefit of the doubt? Yes, if you look nationwide. So most local elections that we see are at the local level. There's no federal recall process in the Constitution at all. States mostly don't allow recalls. So most of what we see at the local level. On average, about 1 out of every 1,000 in a year local elected official will face a recall effort. Most of those, as you talked about locally, fail. Once they get on the ballot, then most of them succeed.
Thank you for that. By the way, we're going to be getting your questions, but we've already heard, because we knew we were doing this, we've had a lot of our own viewers call in. One of them is Frank. I hope it's a different Frank, but we had a Frank from Jackson County. He says, do the owners of the Royals and Chiefs immediately declare they're staying in Jackson County if Frank White is recalled? Sean.
Of course not. But I think one thing is they tried to work with Frank for years, not just before April in 2024, but they tried to work with him before the election in 2022. And they've consistently said that they couldn't constructively work with him. Usually he would send staff, so we start to detect a pattern. And it's not clear that he's even aware what his staff is doing.
Let's not get it twisted or forget. The Chiefs and Royals are a business. And just, a year ago in April, we were in this very same room when that question made it to the ballot. And whether they refused to negotiate with Frank and his team is completely beside the point. They were willing to accept a 40-year, almost $2 billion tax on the backs of you all without any promises or any type of community benefit agreement in writing, legally binding, that would tell them that would tell the teams what they're going to do to the community. So whether the teams say they're going to stay or they're not is null and void at this point. I think the voters spoke very clearly in April and said, regardless of our love and our history with the teams and what this county has done for the teams, we have to be able to take something back. Or what are you going to do for us? And that question was unanswered all the way to and through to this day.
Mr. White.
What you guys have to understand is that I stand between you and in terms of getting a good deal from these teams. Right now, Jackson County is paying more and getting less. We're spending $54 million a year and getting $6 million in return. The city's spending $2 million a year and getting $18 million in return. The state's spending $3 million a year and getting $36 million in return. I wanted to negotiate a better deal for you, the taxpayers, with the teams. Right now, they got the best deal of any sports teams in the country, where they're paying absolutely zero, and all we're doing is paying taxes. And that's why I was able to send them a proposal that said, okay, let's do the 3/8 cent sales tax. Let's do it in 1/3. 1/3 for you, the teams, 1/3 for the county infrastructure and safety, and 1/3 for public health. No response at all from the teams. So as Mr. Smith said, I was in 13 negotiations with these teams, and they basically had a runaround me with 2 of the legislators. The legislators put it on the ballot, which they can do without my consent, and that's what they did. So it wasn't the fact that I was not negotiating with the teams, that the teams had a better deal. They had a better deal with the legislatures who was going around me to get this on the ballot. And like Ms. Smith said, when this was put on the ballot, there was no agreement with the teams. We didn't know where the Royals were going to go. We didn't know what the Chiefs were going to do. But yet they voted on the ballot with no agreement, which Ms. Smith correctly said, would have cost you as taxpayers 40 years of taxes at $2 billion.
Thank you very much. Gwen Grant.
Well, let's get back to the original point. It is not about the failed stadium deal. Frank's recall is about poor leadership and incompetence and the unwillingness to work with the legislature to solve problems on behalf of the people.
Mr. White has said, Mr. White has said this is a political sideshow funded by a dark money group trying to score sweetheart deals on the next stadium. They're upset, he says, he didn't rubber stamp the stadium vote. Who funded the recall effort?
It is funded through a 501c4, which is a nonprofit, and I forget the name of it. You've got it in your notes, the name of but it's a C4. C4s can legally accept private donations. And private donations, so there's a whole notion that, oh, it's dark money, which is more than, it's a lot of rhetoric. Basically, it protects nonprofits. It protects people against retaliation if someone knows. If someone works for Jackson County and they want to make a donation because they're not pleased with the county executive, if their information's out there, they're subject to retaliation.
Let's talk about retaliation. Gwen Grant, there are an increasing number of stories around the country, news stories, talking about how elected leaders of color may be more likely now to be subject of recall elections. Does that pattern worry you?
First off, let me just make it real clear. This recall has nothing to do with the color of his skin. It has everything to do with his poor leadership and incompetence. Let's just be clear about that, because I am a black woman and I support the recall. So race has nothing to do with it.
Greg?
So I'm not aware of any published studies that have shown racial bias in recall elections. The elections are district-based. Most of them are city council and school board elections who face recalls.
Many states, by the way, require there be a specific reason to initiate a recall. Kansas is clear-cut. There has to be a felony conviction, misconduct in office, or failure to perform duties as prescribed by law. Is there any reason that has to be stated in the Jackson County Charter to recall a public official? No. Unless you just don't like them?
No. So this is strictly putting the power in the hands of the voters and the residents of Jackson County. That's what our charter does. The idea that some standard would have to be met before that, if people are disenfranchised and upset with their leaders, they ought to hold them accountable. And I think that's, when we talk about what comes next, the most important thing is what comes next is the next person knows this can happen to them if they don't do a good job. So I think this is vitally important to change the trajectory of Jackson County, which has been challenging for some time. Our last county executive went to federal prison. So we need to change the trajectory, and a recall election is as much about putting on notice all elected leaders in Jackson County, one of which is me.
Yes.
And I admire the voters that have signed this petition without fear, with fear of retaliation, which is real. I hear it from people every day. If I sign this, or my property tax is going up. That's not where we want to live.
Megan Smith, are you concerned about the domino effect? That could include you.
Well, for me personally, no, I'm not concerned about the domino effect, because the way I choose to govern and lead is, I came into this position with a certain level of morality and integrity. That type of stuff you just can't learn on the job. Have I had to learn some things while in this position? Absolutely, I've had. On-the-job training is real when you're in government, because no one knows what it's like to be a legislator, to be an executive, or whatever that position is until you're in that position. But the intangible things give me that confidence to make decisions and stand on the courage of my convictions and not worry about the domino effect, which more recently you've seen when the petitions were certified for this election. Absolutely, the constituents spoke very loudly. However, when I did learn additional information in how having an election on August 26th would coincidentally disenfranchise a certain segment of voters, well, I had to back up on that. And I think as an elected leader, once you know better, you do better. And as you learn and you evolve, you make better decisions. So I think for a recall to happen, our charter is very clear-cut. It's not as clear-cut as Kansas. A lot of our things are done based on how people feel in that moment. But I think the domino effect could be real with the type of leaders that we have in the future.
I know you've got something to say, but we have a lot of questions coming in. Angela is one of them with a question for you. Frank White has legally challenged the recall effort, claiming the signatures were not collected in compliance with Missouri law. Is there a time limit on when signatures have to be collected, or is it open-ended?
I think it's open-ended right now.
So if it's open-ended, is that in violation of Missouri law?
Well, the state statute trumps county. So right now, we're at that point now where we haven't been able to challenge this in the courts to see if there is an issue there. But we're moving forward with what's in front of us. But I want to respond to Ms. Grant saying, talking about my leadership. I quite frankly don't think she even knows what my job is. When you're talking about county versus city. And you talk about me holding back legislators from doing certain things where I've just put out $30 million in funds for disadvantaged communities. When I took over, I don't want to leave the next county executive in the same mess that I got in when I got it here. So I took our pension plan from 74% to 93%. You know, I took our paid family leave from 6 paid weeks to 12 paid weeks. I've added fertility benefits to our health care. You know, I've funded health initiatives in our community. During COVID, I spent $120 million in our community. When the government wouldn't fund our cities, I funded our cities in Jackson County. I funded our health departments, all our school districts, all our first responders, and both my health departments. And I spent $40 million on housing and rental assistance. So to me, that's leadership. That's taking the bull by the horn and making things happen.
Thank you. Gwen.
Leadership requires collaboration from a county executive. It requires collaboration with the county legislature for joint decision-making on behalf of the people who put all of them in office. So, you know, yes, your job is to be the executive administrator over county affairs. It is also your job to work with the legislature to arrive at a budget that is in the best interest of the people of this county and not to single-handedly veto an entire budget rather than line item vetoes, because that veto harmed so many institutions and organizations and the very people you funded, and then you vetoed the budget so they couldn't get any money. So I don't know, like, that's a contradiction.
Well,
so I'm still talking. I am still talking, Mr. County Executive.
Okay.
So we know that under his leadership, we have a failure on the property assessments. We have $70 million in ARPA funds still sitting unused. We have a building sitting down there that he wants to invest millions of dollars in and makes absolutely no sense. We have people, even though the budget has been approved, the very people he said who work at Jackson County, whose raises are being held up because he's sitting on that. I mean, we can go on and on and on and list a number of reasons. I know what your job is about, and you're not doing it, and that's why we need to recall you behind.
Frank White, you are now talking.
I think Ms. Grant is definitely misguided on the issue of the budget. We give the legislature a balanced budget on November 15th. They hold it as long as they want to hold it. It has to be passed on December 31st. And whenever I get the budget back, I have 10-day look at it to see if I need the line item veto or veto the entire budget. But they gave me the budget on December 31st. And then they said, you don't have time to look at it. Then they passed the changes that they made without me looking at it. And then when I did veto the entire budget, then that's when they filed a lawsuit on the budget. That's why it took us 6 months to get a budget passed. But when you look at what was in the budget, they cut salaries. They cut salaries in my office, county counselor's office, the HR, assessment, collections. Their job is not to fire people. Their job is to give us a reasonable budget to pass. Then they tried to move our finance department underneath the legislature. When I saw all that, I had to veto the whole budget.
Why wouldn't you just say, I don't need this job anymore, I quit?
Because that's not me.
Okay.
I didn't become a world champion running from things. So.
Okay. By the way, we're going to take your questions. If you have a question, you can ask in 20 seconds or less. But any panelist can answer. You can come to the microphone. But I got a lot of questions here, including from Charles, who writes, I won't vote to remove Frank White until I know for certain who his replacement will be. Sean, how do you respond to Charles?
Yeah, so first off, the recall question is just that. It's a recall question. The one other large county that I've ever found that actually did a recall was Miami-Dade in 2011. They didn't have a replacement until they held a special election almost 6 months later. So the fact is that this is not unprecedented to not know who's next, just like any election when somebody decides not to run. So what we have is good options that have been presented to us already, and the hope is that we'll have even more options so that we can make a great choice that can help get the county out of the mess that Frank's left it in.
Greg, don't other states, though, actually put two questions on the ballot? One to say, do you want to recall that official? And secondly, there's the list of candidates who would be appointed or elected if that person is recalled.
Yeah, there's basically three ways of doing it. So some places you'll see a recall and a replacement on one ballot. Some places you'll see a recall, and then if it's successful, you see an election afterwards. And some places, which is more the Jackson County model, you'll see a recall, and then if it's successful, it essentially creates a vacancy, and then the vacancy is filled using the usual vacancy process.
And by the way, the California Governor Gray Davis was recalled, and they had a second question, and that's how Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor. He was one of 135 people on a huge list of who should replace them, and it doesn't take much of a vote at that point to actually win, and that's exactly what happened in California. Of course, we're not from California. We're right here at the Plaza Library listening to you with your question, madam.
Yes, for Ms. Smith, you said there's collateral damage to doing a recall, and I would be interested to know what those damages are.
Thank you for doing all of that in less than 20 seconds. You get a Kansas City PBS card. Megan.
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you for the follow-up. Well, in short, the immediate collateral damage is the $2 million that's cost to actually conduct this election that wasn't budgeted for. That's something that is bought and paid for by the taxpayers. The other type of collateral damage really was alluded to from Charlie's question that Nick had proposed with what's next. A lot of people may not agree with Frank's leadership. However, they're not too sure about ousting Frank because they don't know what's next. It's kind of like that devil you know type of scenario. And so the collateral damage that you face when you're kind of in that situation of unknown, where you have a lot of community services and a lot of, because the county's not only in charge of assessments, we're in charge of public health, we're in charge of public safety. Those types of things just kind of screech to a halt somewhat until there's some type of stability. And of course, not to mention just the erosion of trust that's been just growing within the county.
Even though it's not required under the charter to actually name who this person is, couldn't the Jackson County Legislature voluntarily, for the benefit of being transparent to the voters, say this is who we would name if Frank White is recalled on September 30th? Why not do it voluntarily?
Absolutely, that's possible. What I would say is there's a couple of impediments to that. One is that we don't know yet who the best candidate is because new names will continue to appear until the recall is successful.
The next Jackson County executive could be this man. I don't know. We just,
no, Dan Tarwater.
No question, sir.
With all due respect, Mr. White, how on earth do you feel that you don't have to communicate with your own fellow legislators, and you repeatedly have said that up here, I don't have to show up. You only solve problems in this country by face-to-face communication. One final thing. It is about our property taxes. It isn't about the stadium. You're misreading us as taxpayers.
Thank you so much. Your chance to respond, Mr. White.
In terms of showing up, I'm there every single day in my office, every day. We have meetings every Monday to go over the agenda. My door's been open. I met with every legislator when they first came in the office. I laid out what the county was all about, what we had ahead of us, what we can move forward with. But when you look at a legislative branch, sometimes they get 5 votes, and those 5 votes stay together. And regardless of what you do, I've worked with different legislators on different projects, but they still vote in a block. And it's hard to get things moving when you have 5 legislators who vote in a block. Then you have 4 legislators who want to get something done, but they can't get anything done.
Can I ask you this then? How would your life be any easier if you survived this recall vote and we're still in office then for another year and a bit?
Well, I would just implore the legislature to communicate. We have a lot of things that we need to get done at the county. Like I said, right now we're in the middle of trying to do a pay study. We're in the middle of trying to maybe do another retirement increase in the pension. So we have a lot of things that we have on the table. Like I said earlier, there's $30 million already RFP that's out there that the legislature will have to vote on who gets those funds.
When?
So allowing Frank, the county executive, to stay in office another year will just result in a year of lost time and progress, because he refuses to work with the legislature. He's not worked with any legislature that's been there since he's been in office. And to say that, oh, if I'm there, they need to do. He's not talking about what he needs to do. So everybody needs to cross over and do what Frank wants. And the reason we don't get any progress is because if those 5 people vote against something because they don't agree, he's not willing to communicate, collaborate, to try to find middle ground. That's been the problem. But he hasn't worked with any legislature productively since he's been down there.
Okay, Sean.
So the idea that it's 5 members of the legislature that always vote in a block is just a fallacy. The fact is that Mrs. Smith, when she was Mrs. Marshall, in our first year, was consistently with a certain group of 5. Things have changed and they have evolved. For me, as I realized the challenges that were coming from the executive branch, and that early on the folks who I thought were trying to grab power were in fact trying to balance power, trying to do their jobs in a way that the executive and his staff didn't like.
What have you done to work with Frank White?
I have reached out to him and his staff consistently. I can produce for you a memo where he's decided just in the last couple of months to direct every legislative inquiry through one specific individual, one of those same individuals who gave themselves a raise last month.
Sir, we're ready for your question.
Frank, I really liked you. We together on the ball field with our kids were playing ball. And even after you became county executive, I saw you once. I thought you were a good guy. But I got to ask, you don't seem to appreciate the way you were talking about it. These funds you did for this and how you saved that, that's our money. That's our tax money. That's not your money. That's not Sean's money, not anybody else's money. I just was wondering, why don't you think a little more about that way of looking at it?
Well, sir, these funds are being put back in the community. These funds that I'm talking about, this $30 million, the RFP that's out today, is for disadvantaged communities. So that is your money working for the community. Mr. Smith, I've never refused. We had a face-to-face meeting when he first came into office, and he's never requested a meeting since then. So he'd always met with my county administrator, but never to me face-to-face. So I've always been available. I mean, when you look at when Mr. Smith wanted to get radios for Long Jack and Greenwood, we got radios. When Ms. Donna Payton wanted money for housing, there's $3 million in the budget for housing. When they wanted money for outside agencies, there's $6 million in the budget for outside agencies. When they wanted street lights in Blue Summit, we've got that ready to go. They wanted playground equipment in Blue Summit, that's ready to go. So we're doing our job. Now,
the notion that you can send your staff to a meeting that we elected you to do is disrespectful of the people who put you in office. We didn't elect your staff, we elected you. And we expect you to show up in these meetings and negotiate and work on behalf of the people.
So why do you do that then, Mr. White, if that's true?
Well, I went to meetings earlier in their tenure, but the meetings turned out to be performative politics. It was one of those, if you go back and look at a lot of the agendas, there's a lot of things held, and then they get down to Mr. Smith and Mr. Abaca. It's just performative politics. So it's never anything being passed. It was always hold this, hold this, hold it. And go back and look at the agenda. I mean, it's there for you to see. And I think that was, and for me not going, and I usually would go and make some type of announcement of something good that's going on in the county, but it turned into performative politics. Yes. And I really felt like if I wasn't there, then things would get moving along, and which still had to happen.
Okay. I'm assuming you got this T-shirt from a thrift store. It's just random. It doesn't say how you're voting on this election. But your question, madam?
My question is, I know Frank remembers this. When we were at a meeting out in Raytown, I literally was standing in a puddle of tears for my friends in Raytown because it was hit harder than any other city. And I asked Frank, how can you just sit back and watch this happen to all these people?
You're talking about the property assessments?
Yes. And your answer to me mystified me. You said, you don't understand. The lobbyists are not doing their job. How are the lobbyists supposed to do your job? I'm wondering.
Okay, thank you.
That was your answer to me.
Okay.
In front of your wife.
You have a chance to clarify, Mr. White. Thank you, Miss.
Thank you.
Well, I don't recall using the word lobbyist. I mean, when you look at what we're mandated by the state to do assessments. We don't make these decisions at the county level. When we follow the mandates of the State Tax Commission, and then the assessor puts a plan in place around those mandates that goes back to the State Tax Commission for their recommendations and approval. Then the final of this plan that she puts together has to be passed by the legislature before it goes into action.
I'm going to pause some of the questions just a second. Stay there, Miss. I just want to clarify so we don't miss out on something. I talked about we don't know who would be the county executive if Frank White is recalled on September 30th. So, Megan Smith, who decides who will fill Frank White's shoes if he is recalled?
The chair of the legislature appoints an interim for a 30-day period, and then that is voted on by the full legislative body.
What if the full legislature can't agree on that person either?
Well, which is very likely to happen, right? You must have been watching the meetings.
No, I was listening to Frank White. That's what I was thinking.
If that doesn't happen, then the decision is made by the presiding judge of the county, Judge Harrell.
Okay.
Well, I think it's important to point out that if it takes 5 votes to appoint that person after the 30 days. So the chair appoints for 30 days, and they have for the first 30 days. Then they have another 30 days.
Actually, we have to make that decision within the first 30 days.
Within the 30 days.
So that temporary appointment might only serve a day. And Frank says we vote as a block. Well, then it should be pretty easy to determine. There's going to be 5 votes for somebody if we're all voting as a block, right?
Yes.
You can't do the math both ways and claim that you're accurate and honest.
Okay. Madam, we're ready for your question.
I recently heard about your kidney cancer, and I was curious to know, how were you able to have a kidney removed and take that amount of time off work and nobody noticed?
I was only off work 6 days.
Asked and answered. Do you have a question, sir? Yes. Thank you for waiting for us.
No problem. Okay. Hey, Frank.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. I'm brand new to politics, and I'm glad your kidney stuff went well. So I think a vote yes to recall you is to remove you from office. But my question is, if you are not recalled, what are you going to do differently for your last year?
Thank you for that question. Mr. White.
I'm just going to continue to move the things that we have on the agenda forward, hopefully with the legislature working with me. I know we've got some pretty key things ahead of us, and I mentioned some of them earlier with the pay study, the pension, the multiplier, trying to do some things there. We have an administration building that needs to be refurbished for the administration to come out of the courthouse, and we're one of the few cities of our size where the administration is actually located in the courthouse. So the previous legislature voted that building to us, and we had the funding for it. But this new legislature felt like they wanted to do a different funding source with these dollars, and so the building is still sitting there with assessment working there and the Board of Equalization's working out of it.
Greg, I want to bring you back in, because another thing I've been reading, looking at recall elections all across the country, is there is a concern among political scientists that not only does this undermine representative democracy, recall elections, we have votes after all, why do we need to do this, but also it creates an environment in which an elected leader may not want to make a tough decision because it's too easy to be recalled.
Yeah, so, I mean, the first thing I would say is recall elections are very rare at this point. Is it possible that they could be weaponized on a grand scale at some future point? It's possible, but at this point, recall elections are really rare. The circumstances in which we see them are extraordinary. in terms of politicians making tough choices, I mean, that's something that we look at a lot in terms of institutional design. There are things that matter. So particularly if you look at like the fiscal health of a region, bond ratings, things like that, that's where we often see evidence of tough fiscal decisions either being made or not being made. There's no systematic evidence that recall elections in some places or not in some places impact a politician's willingness or unwillingness to make those decisions.
Mr. White.
I think if you're an elected official that's trying to climb the ladder, I think it would be difficult for that elected leader to make tough choices. It's very difficult in politics to make the right choice because of the repercussions that come from that. But when I was elected, this is as high as I wanted to go. I wasn't looking to go to state. I wasn't looking to run for Congress. So it was easy for me to make the tough decisions. I make the tough decisions during COVID. I make the tough decisions on the stadiums. So my tough decisions are made because I'm from the community, and they've made in really trying to look at the community and say, okay, is this going to benefit the community? The stadiums, that didn't benefit the community. It doesn't benefit the community now. What does the community get from the stadiums that get funded at 100%? And so you got thousands of people in Kansas City that would never set foot in that parking lot, let alone in that.
What would be the impact on Jackson County, in your view, then, if the Royals and the Chiefs decided to move to the Kansas side?
I don't think that's one thing that I want people to be clear. My intention is to keep both teams in Jackson County, but I want to make sure that the teams understand that they have to have a relationship with the community. It just can't be 100% give to the teams with no return to the community. And I think when you look at the fact that a lot of people are making these decisions on behalf of you, the Kansas City residents, don't even live in Jackson County. So I think that's what you have to look at from my standpoint. My standpoint is to look out for the taxpayers. Now, if the taxpayers come to me and say, hey, we don't care what we pay on taxes, whatever you have to give these guys, give it to them, then maybe you look at it differently. But as the leader of the county, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of where we are fiscally versus where we because right now it's not a good deal. We're paying too much and getting too little. But I'm just trying to make sure that I'm still talking, please.
Okay.
He gave me the...
Okay, we're even. Can we say we're even and we can move on? Thank you, Mr. White.
Okay, but quite frankly, you failed the people when it comes to taxes. Okay, the real estate property assessment debacle was a failure of the people. But the important thing here is to understand that a recall is never easy. And in this particular case, there's a high threshold to get this recall on the ballot. 43,000 signatures had to be 42,000 plus signatures had to be certified. 43,000 signatures were certified. That is a high threshold. So it's never easy to do a recall. But a recall gives the voters redress when the leader has failed them. And that is, in fact, democracy in action.
So it's not just going to a grocery store on a couple of weekends early in the morning to make this happen.
That's absolutely right. It was a tremendous effort, first by grassroots folks that started well before the stadium vote was even placed on the ballot and scheduled for an election. Later with some outside professionals, which somebody did choose to contribute and kick in, the fact that they were fearful and did it through a 501c4. And in some cases are the same organizations that supported Frank in his original campaign and are now opposed to him. That's interesting. What I want to talk about is the $100 or so per household in sales tax that was defeated compared to the thousands of dollars per household that we jacked up people's property taxes in an unlawful way and are still holding their $250 million. $250 million for 2 years worth of receipts that the State Tax Commission, which Frank says we have to follow their orders, he appealed it in court over the objection of the legislature, and when he lost, he appealed it again and is still holding the money of the people that are sitting in this audience tonight and thousands of others. That's abysmal.
Thank you. Sir, we're ready for your question.
Well, thank you all for being here. I am a senior citizen, so we're a little bit concerned about the taxes, but my two questions are power grab. I think the seat goes to a Democrat, if I'm correct. I don't know how that's a power grab. Frank says he's not going to run again. People can say whatever they want. I would just wipe that off the slate until you actually see it happen. And then I'm going to challenge my host here. We are in Missouri, not Kansas, when it comes to election law.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for challenging me. Mr. White, your response?
The only response I have on the power grab, meaning that they're elected officials who want to give the teams everything that they want. And they're never going to get a better deal anywhere than they have right now. And the backroom deals that are made at your expense, that's the power grab. The power grab is to get me out of office, appoint their favorite person in there that they know will, and I really believe that if I'm not in office, next April you will have a stadium vote on the ballot. Okay. And for members of this legislature, excluding Mrs. Smith, to vote to put a tax on the ballot that's going to cost you 40 years of taxes at a cost of $2 billion with no agreement in place, to me, that's egregious.
That question had a reference there to the political aspects of it all, and one of the parts of the charter, Sean Smith, is that if an elected leader is recalled, they have to be, quote, replaced by a member of the same political party as the person being recalled. Many people are scratching their heads why that's even in there. Why does that make a difference?
Yeah, so I'd love it if our charter had us nonpartisan. Frankly, most of the things the county deals with are not partisan issues. We don't vote in the legislature as though we're partisan. So I'd very much like that to change someday. But for now, it simply is what it is. It means that I'm not eligible and Ms. Lauer's not eligible, and name another Republican in the audience, they're not eligible either. What's interesting is that our boards and commissions, when people apply to participate in their government, ask what party you're with. And we often have 75% of those right now are either not filled or they're filled by people on expired terms. That's bringing the government potentially to a grinding halt, and all of those appointments are part of what the county executive is supposed to do. And he's excluding 40 to 45% of the Jackson County population by not even considering Republicans.
Megan Smith, as you've gone through this arduous process of recall, would you support changing the recall provisions in the charter?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What would you change?
I think the one question that the man just spoke up there and asked about the party affiliation, I don't think the replacement should have to be of the same political party. Those are provisions that the legislature, knowing that a recall would have been inevitable, we could have gotten together if we would have had cooler heads and made those provisions in place before we got to this stage. So yes, I would support. We've learned a lot.
Given that this is such a drastic measure, removing someone from office, should it require more than a simple majority vote, that we should have a higher bar than that?
That's interesting. That's interesting you would ask that question. I think that looking at the nature of special elections, when you talk about certain areas of our county who have historically low voter turnout in regularly scheduled elections, I think that you do invite an avenue of approach for those special interest groups and those different organizations and outside interests to come in and influence someone that the public has voted into office, because the numbers that you need to actually vote someone out are far less than what you need to put it on the ballot. So I think that is something that is worth looking at for the future.
Greg Vonamy, are there places that require a higher threshold to say, hey, this is a kind of a drastic measure here? It should be more than just 50% of the vote.
There's no place that I'm aware of that requires more than 50% to recall an official.
All righty. Thank you. Yes, sir, we're ready for you.
Thank you. Frank, if I may call you Frank, you seem to be reapplying for your job here, and there's a pretty large selection committee. We've heard a lot about your strengths, your discussion of budget numbers and things. Those are all opinion. What is your greatest weakness as a leader, and what can you do? What can everybody do to help you overcome that?
Thank you very much.
I think every administrator, the weakness is going to be, how do you bring all of your legislators into an agreement that we're going to work together on a regular basis? And I think that is tough when each of the 9 legislators have their own idea of what they want to get accomplished. And sometimes that is not working with you, it's working with what they want. Because I don't set policy for the county, the legislature does. I recommend things to the legislature when they want to listen, but they don't have to follow my direction, as they did with when they put the use tax on the ballot. You know, I said, don't put a use tax on the ballot in a reassessment year. But they ignored me, put it on the ballot, cost us $1.5 million, and it got killed at the polls. When I said, don't put the Chiefs tax on the ballot, let the Chiefs pay for it and the Royals pay for it, because if we do it in April, it's going to cost us $1 million. They ignored me, and they put it on. That was $1 million gone.
I'm looking at your face during that.
Yeah, because you're sitting here, you don't meet with them, and then you're saying, you know, we need to meet and work together, and then you say, well, I told them to do this, and they did that. You did not collaborate, you dictate, and that's why you don't get anywhere with the legislature. I mean, it's just ludicrous to me that you would sit here and say, oh, the person needs to meet with them and work with them when you don't show up for meetings.
Quick rebuttal then, Mr. White.
There's a reason with this. There's a reason with this legislature that you have 4 legislators who come to work every day
minority
to try to get something done, and you got 5 who don't want to do anything. So even the 4 who want to get something done are stymied by these 5 that don't want to get anything done. And you don't have to ask. You don't have to take my word for it. You can ask Ms. Smith. You can ask Ms. Lauer. You can ask Mr. Franklin. You can ask Mr. Anderson. They want to get something done. They're stymied because
they're the other members of the legislature who are not on our panel. Miss, we're ready for you.
Thank you. Mr. White, could you please explain the reasoning behind the recent valuation of my agricultural property as commercial, despite it being actively used for agricultural purposes for over 11 years?
I can tell you that as a county executive, I don't set values. I'm not allowed to set values. They're set by the BOE and the State Tax Commission. But I will tell you that throughout the years, Jackson County's done a poor job of property assessment.
Who is at fault for that? Is that the assessor?
I think over the years, it's just been a combination of assessor. When I came into this office, our county assessor was just a friend of a legislator. There wasn't an assessor. When I hired Ms. Beatty, she was the first assessor that was hired by the county in some time. So, and I get your frustration, but that is not at the purview of the county executive. And if you read in Chapter 20 of our county codes, what it reads that my only responsibility is to make sure that you have an appeals process in place. I can fix clerical things, if you get double taxed, if you have a wrong address, those type things.
Now you've got homework, Miss. Read Chapter 20. But I will... Miss, we're ready for your question.
I'm going to say this, is the assessor was appointed by Frank White.
Yes.
And not only does he therefore control that position, but also he sends us a budget request to determine what funds are needed. And 2 different courts have determined that our assessment in 2023 was done with gross incompetence and that we denied people due process in the appeals process. And Mr. White didn't change anything for 2025. So the fact is that it is ultimately with him because the legislature can't fire our assessor. Only now the community can by first choosing to replace Frank.
Yes, we're ready for you.
Linda McClellan here, and I am a real estate broker. I thank you all for being here, Mr. White. I really respect you, and I see a leader as a person that can delegate, and it appears that you've done that. I also see and believe that there are people here on the panel that are disgruntled employees, okay? These high taxes has not just happened. They've been going on for a long, long time. And it's my understanding when someone says this has nothing to do with color, I want you to look at this audience we have here today, okay? And second, what I want to say is my understanding there's 9 people, I know I get 2 minutes, 9 people on that.
Okay.
I know it's 9 people on that legislation. Okay.
Is there a question?
The question is, we have to go above and beyond. You hold your head up and you march out of here knowing you've done a good job. There is no question. I'm just making a statement.
Thank you. You've got support, Mr. White. Okay, let's go to you, sir.
All right, Frank, I am a retired executive at a large company in Kansas City. I had 350 plus people, and I found it appalling that you do not show up to meetings. I find it appalling that you do not have communication out there. And I want to ask a question. Why now are you standing up here and having your face on TV when you did not do that during the tax assessment, and you did not do that during the Royals game, or the Royals and Chiefs? Also, have you ever talked about the Kansas City sales tax that we're going to lose out on when the Chiefs and the Royals move to Kansas? And something that you might recognize, you're out.
Okay. Mr. White, you have a chance to respond to anything that you choose to from that.
I think I was in 13 negotiations with the Chiefs and the Royals, so that speaks for itself, and we'll let that go.
Okay, let me ask you this. What happens if Frank White survives this election, Megan?
I think we need to get back in the drawing room and start learning how to work together for this next year that we have, because there are still a lot of things at stake, and the taxpayers elected us to do a job, and so that's what needs to happen.
Yes. Mr. White, you've just been successful. You are not being recalled. It's September 30th, and you are staying in office. What's the first big change you will make?
The first big change I would make was work with the legislature to try to get the funding out to the community. That's not being right now. I got $30 million in RFP at this time, but they also have funds in their budget for outside agency funding that needs to get out to the community. So just encourage them to get those funds out so we can move forward.
Will you hold a beer summit where you hug and make up with your fellow lawmakers here?
I'm a team player, so if that's what they want to do, I'll do. I don't mind that.
Would you join in a beer summit?
I'm more of a whiskey guy, but yeah.
Okay, all righty. Gwen?
So if he survives the recall, he'll be a lame duck county executive, and we can expect another 12 months of unproductive governance at Jackson County. So we will suffer a lot if we do not recall Frank White. He will not make changes, and he will not cross over and meet with the legislature. He hasn't done it in the past. He's not going to start doing it in next month.
Have you got that final balancing thought for us as we weigh this decision, Greg?
I get the final thought? Yeah, sure.
Is it a yes, yes, no
it's a yes
question?
No, this is just a straight yes. I'm very grateful for everybody who comes at this with passion and different perspectives, and I'm very grateful for Nick and for everybody in the audience who's so engaged with this.
Absolutely, and I was impressed that people were able to ask most of their questions in 20 seconds or less. You have been watching Jackson County Legislator Sean Smith, Urban League CEO Gwen Grant, Professor Greg Vonamy, Frank White, our Jackson County executive, and Jackson County Legislator, formerly known as Megan Marshall, now Megan Smith. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for your questions. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, September 30th, and advance voting is already underway. From all of us at the Kansas City Plaza Library here in Kansas City, and from our crew here at Kansas City PBS, be well, keep calm, and carry on. Yeah, okay.